Welcome to another in our series of the Kanban Guide. We have Nisha, who's staring intently at me right now. Hi, Nisha. And also we have
Pratik Singh.
Hi, Pratik. Thanks for being with us. In this episode, we are going to be talking about the first of the Kanban practices, which is defining and visualizing the workflow. So central to this idea of defining and visualizing your workflow is this concept known as a definition of workflow. Pratik, can you talk to us a little bit about what is a definition of workflow?
Yeah, it's as we deliver value to whoever receives value from this Kanban system, we have to define, or we should understand at least, how bits of value flow through this system. What is the workflow that they go through from being ideas to becoming actual potential things of value that we deliver? That is the definition of workflow, how those things flow to customers who want to receive them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's great. You hit the nail on the head. It's all about our shared understanding, putting some rigor around our shared understanding of how we actually work, how we actually do work. Now, there are certain elements that go in that Kanban requires, and this is one of the few times that Kanban is actually going to require certain things, but there are certain requirements of your definition of workflow. So let's maybe take a minute to step through some of those. Pratik, what's the first requirement of your definition of workflow?
Yeah, the very first thing is the individual units that actually deliver this value. What are the work items that are moving through our system that would get delivered and to customers, where we can get feedback on whether they are valuable or not? That's the first thing. What are the individual units of value that flow through our system?
Yeah, that's great. Because remember, always coming at it from a value perspective, not even necessarily customer value perspective, but a value perspective. And those work items are potential value. That's one thing we need to emphasize. As we're working on them, we don't know if they're valuable or not, they're potential value. So that's the first thing. The second thing, which I will take, is we need to draw some boundaries around our process. We need to have some understanding of, well, what does it really mean for us to have started working on one of these things that you're talking about? And just as importantly, but maybe less importantly, what does it mean for us to have finished working on one of these things? And how you define those started and finished points are completely up to you. The only thing that the Kanban guide is going to require is that you have at least one of each. You have at least one started and one finished. You can have multiple, and depending on what question you're going to want to answer, you might choose to draw the boundaries of your process, differently. But you have to have at least one well-defined point where work starts, one well-defined point where work finishes.
Yeah, and then we had the work items, and now we have where they exist in terms of a started and a finished points. Then the third thing that we layer on top of this is the defined states through which this work flows between the start and the end point, start and the finish point that we have picked. If we have a started point, I'm sure there's a stage right after started, and if there's a finish point, there's a stage right before finished. Now, it could be one stage or more, but we need at least one or more defined stage where the work flows through in order to get delivered.
And that's a very important point, because a lot of people will tell you that to do, doing, done is not a valid workflow. To do, doing, done, where doing is your only active state in your workflow. They say, that's not Kanban, that's not a valid Kanban system. Wrong. It actually is. It very much is. Assuming we have some of these other things that we're talking about, it very much can be a Kanban system. Whether it's useful or not, that's a completely different question. But it is valid. You can do it. So the rest of these elements, we'll just list them here for completeness in this particular video, but we'll probably go into a little bit more detail in some of the coming videos. So the next one is a definition of how work in progress is going to be controlled in your system. It's all well and good to have boundaries defined and know what your work items are, but the whole point of Kanban is that you're not overloading your process. That we are taking an active role in terms of limiting or controlling the number of things that we're working on in any given time. Again, that's one of those things that I think we'll spend a little bit more time on in the next video. What's after controlling WIP?
Yeah, another thing that we'll spend time in a later video, is the policies that guide the work as it moves through. What are the rules to the game? We have these work items flowing between start and finish in stages and limited whip. What are the other rules that guide the item through that we follow? Well, again, spend more time on this in a future video.
And the final one that we're going to punt for now is something called a service level expectation. I think this is probably the most overlooked element of all of these. If I had to pick one, the service level expectation, most people think, oh, we're doing Kanban because we know what our work items are, and
There's a board.
Yeah, and there's a board. That's so a service level expectation, and why that's important will probably be in our active management video that's coming up, hopefully in this playlist. We kind of skipped ahead. We kind of told you the punchline, but the point is, once you have your definition of workflow defined, it's not enough just to say, okay, we've defined it. Part of that definition really is, all right, how are you going to express this shared understanding? More often than not, that's some type of visualization. That's some type of, whatever you want to call it, information radiator or whatever. But whatever that definition and that visualization together, however that manifests itself, that's what's called a Kanban board. So when somebody comes and says, hey, look at my beautiful Kanban board, one of the things you might want to do is take a look and say, all these things that we've just said about your definition of workflow, are they listed on that board?
Yeah. And just as we've talked about before, the Kanban guide is minimalist in the sense of setting up, hey, what is the minimum criteria? The team, the system members can decide to add whatever else they want on top of this. This is just the minimum criteria to get the definition of workflow going. The Kanban system members might decide to add a lot more on top of this to better define their system.
As well as there are no restrictions or even no guidelines in terms of how you want to visualize this or communicate your shared understanding. Kanban puts no restrictions whatsoever in terms of that. It's one of the things, a friend of ours, Steve Reed, likes to say. It's like, you're only limited by your imagination in terms of how you want to put these things together. Just know that you have to put them together if you want to be doing Kanban. Pratik, a final word on definition of workflow?
Yeah, this is just the beginning. We're definitely gonna, as you heard both of us say, we've skipped over a couple of these things. Simply going into detail on a couple of these things. Those will be in the upcoming videos.
So there you have it. As always, remember, look to the Kanban guide, kanbanguides.org website, as well as the ProKanban website. Links will be provided, in this video. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in the next episode.